the full self-driving, I think that Elon Musk is going to probably surprise the planet, and before year end, he'll say, "I've got it." I don't know how, but like measuring all the emperors or all the noses or whatever, and saying there's a general average. I think that Tesla likes to make surprises, and it wouldn't surprise me if they came out with full self-driving before year end.
Welcome back, everybody. If you're new, my name is Nicholas, and this is Investing Against the Grain. In today's episode, we are going to analyze a recent Sandy Munro interview where he goes over and breaks down all of the nuances when it comes to Tesla and what separates them from the field. Okay, what separates them from all of the competition, the Fords, the Volkswagens of the world. Now, this interview gets fairly deep into the technical, but not so much where it's meant just for the nerds, geeks, and engineers of the world. Okay, this is an interview that's meant for everybody. And if you are a major Tesla investor, and if you follow the premise of this channel of Investing Against the Grain, where you go heavy into a certain position for huge types of returns, we're talking about orders of magnitude types of return, you have to know the pros and cons, the advantages and disadvantages of the company you're investing in. And if Tesla is that company, you should definitely watch this video to the very end. It is very important, and it differentiates Tesla from the field 100%. So if you enjoyed this type of content, do us a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button below, and let's go ahead and get into it.
What I wanted to ask you, as I know that you not only rip apart noses, but also cars, I know that you have lately turned down the Moki, and you have said you have done a classification of batteries. And also you made a classification of motors in the 2019 Model 3. So I wanted to ask you just to say how many years Tesla is ahead in this in each of these sections. You can say plus or minus if they're beside, okay?
Okay, all right.
How many years Tesla is ahead in motors
At
of
least,
the competition?
Three or four.
Three. In batteries?
Batteries, 6 years, maybe 7.
If a full self-driving chip or autopilot chip?
No, their chips and their software are probably 10 years ahead.
So there we see just the very beginning of this interview, right? We're just getting right into it, trying to see what the gap is between Tesla and, again, the field. Okay, this goes for everyone. This isn't just EVs. This is all auto manufacturers out there. Okay, so we talk about motors. As Sandy says that Tesla's ahead by 3 to 4 years. We talk about batteries. Sandy says that Tesla is ahead by 6 to 7 years with batteries. FSD chip and software, 10 years, a decade ahead of anyone else. Okay, so right off the bat, nobody's even close to Tesla when it comes to the main parts of an EV, when it comes to motors or batteries. And then moving into the future, just for example, let's say that somebody else were to come out with a vehicle that crushes Tesla, so much better than Tesla. But then Tesla comes out with full self-driving, nobody's going to buy that other car. It would be pointless. Why would you care about buying another car just because it has better batteries or better motor if it can't drive itself? It would be illogical. But not only does Tesla have the lead with everything when it comes to EVs, the batteries, the motor, they also have a 10-year lead when it comes to FSD. This is insane.
The full self-driving, I think that Elon Musk is going to probably surprise the planet, and before year end, he'll say, "I've got it." I don't know how, but like measuring all the emperors or all the noses or whatever, and saying there's a general average. I think that Tesla likes to make surprises, and it wouldn't surprise me if they came out with full self-driving before year end. Everybody else.
I 100% agree with this. Okay, I've been saying this for the last I think 6 months. I actually have several videos where I've talked about this, where I think full self-driving is coming out by the end of the year. Now, I'll be honest with you. When version 9 of the beta release came out, it seemed like we had longer to go than by the end of this year. Especially since that was the first version of Tesla and FSD without any radar. It was just purely based off Tesla Vision. But then 9.1 came out, and it was a weird thing happened. There was no like monumental step change or anything, but it was very clear that the car was more confident, right? It almost seems like Tesla and the FSD team have more tricks behind the curtain, and they're only letting certain neural nets out at a time that they're testing, and other neural nets they feel like they have down pat. That's almost what it feels like. But at this rate, and like we saw from the last video I'd made, which you can see here, it's all about the FSD 9.1 release, and we go over Elon's Twitter, where he talks about releasing a new iteration of FSD every 2 weeks moving forward. At that rate, right, we're going to see massive growth and progress with FSD before the end of the year. So I really believe, as Sandy does apparently, that by the end of the year, Tesla will have FSD solved, and they will be announcing it. So again, these are wild predictions, right? This may not age well, but just based on what we see, I think these are very not too optimistic assumptions. So let's continue to see what Sandy has to say.
Also saying 4 to 6 years. So
4 to 6 years. Thermal management system.
Their thermal management system is the best on the planet. And I think it's going to take at least another production line. So that would be at least 4 years ahead of everyone else.
4 years. Wiring? That you said that they could improve.
They're going to split that into two. As far as low voltage wiring, they're the same. There's no advantage. High voltage wiring and the system that they've used, that's probably another 4 years ahead of everybody else.
The underbody now with the rear mega casting.
10 years. It'll take 10 years for no one's going to be jumping into that.
And their operating system, like the regular operating system.
It's hard to separate operating systems because Tesla does a lot of incorporate. They bring several systems and put them into one. No one else has that at all. Zero people have that. So I guess I would say it's probably around 5 years.
Okay, so let's break this down a little more. So first, he talks about the thermal management system. Again, I've done an entire video of this. I'll link it up here so you can check it out. But with their thermal management system, as Sandy said, it's the best in the world. Okay, and at best, anyone is 4 years. Tesla's 4 years ahead of anyone else. And then we go into the wiring. Okay, so when it comes to wiring with anything, all right, you normally have two wiring systems. You have a low voltage side and a high voltage. And this is very subjective depending on what you're doing. For instance, your AC unit probably has a 24 volt low voltage side and a 220 side high voltage. Your car can have anywhere from a 12 to a 40 low voltage side, and then everything else above that would be considered high voltage. Now with the low voltage side, Tesla, Sandy's saying there's no, advantage, right? It's neutral. However, when it comes to the high voltage side and the wiring for that, Tesla's 4 years ahead. Okay, so great for everyone else. Low voltage is one thing they don't have to worry about. But even that, I would argue, because they may be replacing things like with the lead acid battery with the lithium battery, but I think everyone will go down that route eventually. But either way, 4 years ahead with the high voltage. Now, with the underbody and the casting system, what they're really referring to is the Giga Press, okay? Where Tesla is stamping out the front end, the rear end, and having just a structural battery pack, and that's it. So the entire structure of the body is in 3 parts. Meanwhile, everybody else is making the structure with hundreds of parts, with hundreds of robots that have to weld all these pieces together, and guess what? None of it will be perfect. Whenever you can stamp out a piece, and put it together, it's like little Lego pieces. Every single one comes out dead nuts accurate, okay? Precision down to the milli, okay? This is incredible. And with this, nobody else is even attempting it because all of the OEMs, for example, they all have already invested all this money in what they're doing, right? With their stamping presses and with their welding machines and with all their robots. They don't want, this already a sunk cost. They don't want to have to reinvent it. Meanwhile, Tesla, a company that's led by engineers, not MBAs, has a whole different mindset with this. Their mindset is, how can we get better? How can we iterate on this, right? How can we get rid of pieces and parts and processes, right? The best process is no process. The best part is no part. And then we go down to the operating system. He says they're 5 years ahead. Now you see that Sandy kind of pauses and hesitates with this because it's very hard to quantify for him. You see, what's different is with Tesla, they aren't making one operating system to handle a certain set of systems and another software for another subset of systems, right? Everything is interwoven together, right? True software engineering, where they're not bolting on different solutions and trying to deliver that as a cohesive, efficient product. Instead, everything is working together seamlessly. It's meant to work together, okay? And when you accompany all of that together and the amount of communication and teamwork and coordination that would have to go into that, Sandy's saying that they're at least 5 years ahead of everyone else. Okay, so even if you don't watch any more of this video, even up to here, it should be very clear to you. This is a company worth investing in because they are just levels ahead of everyone else. Okay, from every type of aspect, from motors to batteries to full self-driving, which may come out at the end of this year. I would really hate to be that person who thought, man, I should have invested in them before full self-driving came out. Okay, because that will be revolutionary. That will be the next, going from horses to the automobile, going from typewriters to keyboards on the computer, going from your stupid Nokia brick to your smart iPhone. That's what this is going to be. Probably even more of a step change on top of that. Okay, with the thermal management system, the wiring system, the underbody, the OS, right? It's inevitable. This is insurmountable lead that Tesla has. Okay, I'll shut up now. Let's see what else Sandy has to say.
Yeah.
5 years. Is there any part of the EVs, like the modern EVs, that Tesla is besides the competition, apart from the panel gaps that we already know that you've said it like several times? But
their panel gaps have caught up. If you're looking for things that Tesla has not done well or Tesla could improve on, there are some things that we would suggest. Like one would be when we tore the Ford apart. I just recently did a video on it. I like the idea of using planetary gears as opposed to spur gears. And if you use planetary gears, you get a quieter ride. You don't get that whine. So that would be one thing that I would suggest that Tesla might want to do. The other is on their electric motor. They use a wound motor, and I would recommend a hairpin style motor. So, and that's nothing to do with performance or anything. That has only to do with the fact that they can automate a hairpin motor as opposed to, and these are permanent magnet motors. I did have a suggestion before. I suggested that they get rid of the copper in their induction motors, and they did. They went with aluminum. So those are the things that I would suggest are good. Oh, and then the last one, the one that I'm the most high on, and that's to go away from radar, LiDAR, or any other DAR for that matter, and move toward FLIR, forward-looking infrared. That's the best way, as far as I'm concerned, to identify people and objects in the rain or the snow or fog, whatever.
So here we get the other side of it, right? So, being unbiased, he asked to Sandy, what could Tesla improve on, or what can they work on? And he started off with the panel gaps. And right away, you hear Sandy say, well, the panel gaps aren't an issue anymore, right? They've essentially done away with that. Now, with that said, he does bring up going to a planetary gear set versus a spur gear. Okay, the main difference here is really just the cost of it. Okay, yes, planetary gear set is, would be a lot better. If you've taken any kind of mechanical engineering class, you would understand, how it works. You essentially have what they call the sun gear, which is right in the middle, and all the other gears are kind of the planetary parts around the sun, and they all just go around, right? The sun gear is the bigger gear, and then everything else goes around it. And these do tend to be quieter, and but they're very, very much so more expensive. So I can understand why Tesla's going with that. As far as the hairpin motor, that's a very interesting idea. I actually don't even think it's more expensive, but I don't have much familiarity when it comes to hairpin motors, so I can't really speak to that one. And then finally, as far as changing their cameras to FLIR type cameras, I actually am fairly familiar with FLIR. One of my neighbors actually used to work for FLIR, so I actually happen to have a lot of FLIR equipment here at my house. But again, going back to the FLIR thing, it's, yes, would it be great to have essentially a thermal imaging camera effectively, used for your FSD? Yes, that would be great. I mean, it can see through, like Sandy said, fog and snow and smoke and, any kind of haze out there. But again, it comes down to a cost thing, and FLIR cameras aren't that cheap, right? It's great technology, but I don't think that the cost is down quite yet to the point where it's something that Tesla would think would be good for mass production, especially if they're very effective with what they're doing now. Okay, if you've seen any of the FSD beta testers out there with all of the footage they've put up on YouTube, a lot of it has this weird haze sometimes when it's dusk or when it's sunrise, and in those moments, you can tell that for us, it's very hard to see outside the window. But apparently the cameras, the 8 cameras all stitched together for one image within the neural nets, they seem to have no problem at all with representing the real world, even in those points of time. So it doesn't seem like the camera is actually getting too hung up with anything like that. But, Sandy's point is well noted as far as from a safety perspective, or, if visibility does become a bigger issue.
And I think you said to Gali that before buying Tesla stock, you had never ever bought one company single stock. Is it right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And why did you decide to do an exception in your financial and buy Tesla stock?
When we tore apart the Model 3, and we got past the ugly parts, like the doors didn't fit and the paint was terrible, on and on and on. Once I got past that and started looking at the technology, and we know where everyone is. I mean, you only see a small fraction of the cars that we actually tear apart, because people pay us quite a bit of money to tear a car apart, assess it, analyze it, cost it, and then come up with redesigns. So that basically allows us to know exactly what's inside of every vehicle that's in the marketplace if we want, or at least the most advanced vehicles. And looking at what Tesla had versus everyone else, to me, this was a no-brainer. I don't care. Anybody can fix a panel. Anybody can fix paint. Anybody can make gaps in a car better. Nobody can make circuit boards like what Tesla did. Nobody can produce electric motors like they do. I mean, they're light years ahead of everyone. Well, at least a dozen years ahead of everyone. So
let's unpack that again. Up until Sandy Munro bought shares of Tesla, he had never owned stock in any single individual company, ever. He's in his late 60s, early 70s. He's never owned an individual company stock except for Tesla. And when asked, why did you decide to make Tesla that first company, they got a hold of one of the first Model 3s. And to his point, the panel gaps were atrocious. The painting was awful. But once they got past all of that stuff and they looked inside and they looked at the actual engineering of the vehicle, they were blown away. Okay? The engineering is what blew them away and led Sandy Munro for the first time in his late 60s, early 70s, to decide to go ahead and buy Tesla stock. Buy stock in a company, an individual company. He's never done this before. To his point, painting, easy to fix. Panel gaps, easy to fix. And he already talked about this earlier. All those problems are gone, right? That's just those are just issues from when a company is first learning how to ramp up and do volume production of anything, right? It's a learning curve, and Tesla has solved that. But he saw early on the engineering within the vehicle, and he was blown away. Like he said, light years ahead, or at least a dozen years ahead of everyone else. Okay, this is powerful. This is a engineer's engineer. He took the car apart all the way down to the nuts and bolts. He analyzed everything. He analyzed the metal being used. He analyzed the motors, the batteries, right? Took it all apart. And that led him to say, I have to buy stock in this company. Now, full transparency, and they talk about it in this interview, but I clipped it out just to make it more condensed of a video. But he no longer owns any stock in Tesla at all. He doesn't own any stock, period. Okay, as Sandy's YouTube channel was growing and he was interviewing more and more people, he decided it would be a conflict of interest for him to hold any stock in any company. So he went ahead and divested and sold everything. He's completely in cash at this point. Okay, even his retirement account, he has no stock in any company. And so with that said, this really leads you to believe that you can trust what he's saying, and because he's coming from an unbiased source. He's not sitting there secretly with thousands of Tesla shares and he's trying to pump up the stock price for his own benefit. Okay, he has no gain. Tesla's not even a customer of theirs. Okay, everybody else is a customer of theirs. No, Tesla isn't one of his customers. He doesn't own Tesla stock. He does not gain by saying what he's saying at all. Okay, so this is as unbiased as you can get from an engineer.
To me, as an engineer, it was any engineer that looks at a Tesla knows that it's far and away the best designs on the planet.
And again, like he just said there, any engineer who looks at a Tesla knows by far it is the best in the world. Any engineer who looks at it, by far the best in the world. Nothing else needs to be said there.
I would say that the thing that really blew my mind the most, and it still does, is their circuit board designs. They are, without a question of a doubt, elegant. And they're very complicated, but they're simple in construction. Many things are combined into one board. They take full advantage of multifunctional thinking. It's very difficult for me to get beyond the electronics and the simplicity of their electronics. That's probably number one.
So the reason Tesla is able to do this, again, has a lot to do with their vertical integration and the fact that all of their teams work cohesively together. Okay, you don't have this siloed effect where we have one team that works on this, another team works on that, and they don't have an exchange of ideas. Instead, they just say, hey, we need this on our board, or we need to have, X chip, X capacitors, these resistors, etc. Right? Instead, all the teams are working together to achieve a final outcome. Is this harder? Yes, immensely. It takes a lot of communication, it takes a lot of coordination, and it takes a lot of planning. However, the end product becomes something that comes across as holistic and cohesive. Okay, and this also allows them to go ahead and build out any intolerances within the circuit boards themselves. The fact that the circuit board is yet another thing that Tesla creates and works on and iterates on and improves and innovates, it's insane, because this should be something that's just completely basic at this point. It's a circuit board. Okay, the circuit boards have been around for generations. Okay, for decades and decades, almost a century at this point, really. This is not something where any OEM should be behind on, yet they are. Again, to echo Sandy's words, it's complicated, but it's so simple in design. And that's the hardest thing to do. The iPhone was it was a perfect example of this, something that we use every single day. You don't need to be technical to understand that your iPhone is very, very complicated. But guess what? It is such an easy design. It's so easy to use, and the experience shows all of that, right? This is what true engineering is. It's a blending of design, software, and hardware. This is the perfect pyramid, right? The whole trifecta.
Close on the heels would be the cooling, the octo valve, the cooling system, and that's for basically a different reason. I mean, I could sit around if I had enough time and maybe design something that would be similar to it, but when I look at how they, like the depth that you have to go into in order to make that happen, I'd have to know almost everything else about the car. So their systems engineering people, I don't know how they work it there at Tesla, but their systems engineering people are obviously the same guys that are connected to the electric motor, because the motor, in essence, has to have, it has the capability for heating the car. I don't know if you knew that. You stall the motor
Yes.
and it creates heat. So, but all these different systems have peculiar or particular needs and wants. In order to make the octo valve system work, you have to have communication extraordinaire. You can't possibly do this in isolation. And so the second thing that I would say is the electronics designs first, but right after that is the environmental control systems, and the reason for that is because of the teamwork they must have in that company in order to generate an elegant small design that basically suits the purpose of everybody and everybody that's associated with a car. So that conductivity for something that has to go everywhere in a car, it's like what you're looking at there is the system that runs the whole car. Without that, nothing else is going to go. I don't care how good your battery is or your motor or anything else. Your system, if that thing fails, everything goes down. It's like your heart.
Again, here we see them talking about the thermal management system. Okay, and in order to create what they did with the octavalve, it took all of the system engineers within Tesla, with all the different organizations, to come together to design this. Why? Because this is what essentially is the heart, like Sandy said, the heart of the entire system. Okay, everything runs through it, through the thermal management system. And when he was referring to taking the heat from the motor, that's essentially a waste heat effect. So in other words, think of any kind of heat sink you might have. So maybe for your processor in your computer, right? You probably have a heat sink on top of that. Or maybe you have a engine that's throwing out exhaust, and you take some of that exhaust, which is a lot of heat, and use that to boil water, right? This waste heat is what they're referring to, and it's essentially just a way to be more efficient with heat that's given off, right? Waste heat. And so they're able to use that as well. But the main point here is that it's all of these teams working together. This is something that you just don't see in a lot of most companies, okay? It's a culture that they have there, a culture of engineering, a culture of teamwork, a culture of iterating, a culture of getting rid of parts and processes so that they can have a more efficient and streamlined device, object, solution, you name it. And this just goes on through every single part of the Tesla org and extends out, right? SpaceX is the same way, right? That's why there's so many synergies between SpaceX and Tesla as well.
Yeah.
Great. And this team is thank you to one man that I wanted to ask you about your visit to Elon Musk in Boca Chica a few months ago. You obviously you had an idea of Elon Musk. You had some chats in the Third Row podcast, But that day, after visiting a SpaceX, then having a one-on-one meeting, and then go to the design meeting with him, what changed in your mind about Elon Musk that you had before that day and after that day?
I didn't really have any preconceived notions about Elon Musk. I'd heard lots of stories, and I heard that he can be quite caustic. And I knew he's the richest guy on the planet. And I know that he's fairly smart. I knew a little bit about his background. I know he came from South Africa and then went to Canada and then went to the States. And he's got quite a number of different citizenships. He's collecting them, I guess. Anyway, I knew that sort of stuff, but I didn't really have a preconceived notion about him. When I got there and I got the chance to actually talk to him and meet him, very down to earth kind of guy. He hasn't got a swelled head. In many cases, when I do work with executives at large corporations, they have a bunch of people that are continuously telling them how smart they are and how good they are and nice Thai boss and all this other stuff. He's not like that at all.
So I actually love this question. This is something that we don't hear enough whenever people interview or meet Elon. So Elon is frequently characterized as has this narrative of being some kind of villain. Okay, he's the person who's outspoken, who says what's on his mind, and a lot of people think he's just this crazy rich billionaire who doesn't really care about anyone, just cares about himself. And I don't understand this premise. I know right now the whole Jeff Bezos thing is going on where, but I don't even want to get into that. But with Elon, he is a man who has sold all his possessions. He lives in a $50,000 house. He, doesn't care about how he's dressed or anything. He sleeps on the factory floors of Tesla and SpaceX, right? He doesn't want to be the CEO of Tesla, but he feels he had to be, because if not, it would go, underground. And he tried hard not to be the CEO multiple times. He doesn't care about power. All he wants to do is engineering work. He doesn't even care about money. Okay, he was recently in a lawsuit and appeared in court, and he jokingly mocked the prosecutor, saying, "Is that all you think about is money? Like, that's pretty sad." Okay, and he's constantly characterized as this villain for some reason. And it's just people who don't really understand who he is. And this was refreshing. Sandy said he was just a down-to-earth guy. He didn't have a swell head, right? He wasn't all high and mighty, right? He was just a down-to-earth guy. And I think it's good to hear more of these things about how people really are, even if it's not good, okay? Even if it was the other way around. Maybe he was, just a not a great person and just came off as an egotistical person that, he's characterized as. And even if that was true, it's good to know more about this, especially if you're investing in a company. And the reason I feel that way is because you can tell a lot about what a company is going to do or where it's headed purely based on their leaders. Okay? A company who has a bad leader is probably going to make bad and poor decisions for the wrong reasons. But a company with a good leader and someone who has the right goals and the right things ahead of them, and their compass going to the true north, I think that's very important to know. So these types of questions I think are very powerful. And even if they're not just about the business, I think they speak a lot to the company and its ethos and its culture in itself.
He came in, he sat down, he said, "Hi, thanks for coming. Would you like some water? Would you like something to eat? Would you like this?" I mean, it was like going to a neighbor's house. And when I first came into the room, then he said, "I'd like to ask you a couple of questions," and he did. And then, "So you got any questions for me?" And I asked him a couple of things, and he said, I can't remember the exact thing, but he said, "We have a lot in common."
So I find that pretty funny. And I mean, that just goes to show you how down to earth Elon is. At the time when Sandy Munro interviewed him, Elon was the richest man in the world. And his first time meeting Sandy, it's just the two of them in a little office at SpaceX, and Elon's asking them, hey, you want something to drink? You want some water? You want some food? Like Sandy said, it's like visiting your neighbor. This is at the time, the richest man in the world, doing something so basic, so human as just saying, hey, you hungry? You want some water? You want a drink? You need anything, right? These are things that I don't know how many people you've interacted with who are higher levels in companies, but a lot of times they kind of walk around with their nose up in the air, and they wouldn't ask a question like that. And I think it's just very telling of an individual, right? And just shows you where they are and how grounded they are. There's a pun somewhere in there with SpaceX and grounded. I don't know it right now, but there's something there. If you can think of it, leave it down in the comments.
When we asked Elon, is there anything you want to cut? Nope. Do whatever you want. No, I don't need to see it.
So again, this is amazing. And this just goes to show that he has nothing to hide. He is who he is. He's himself. Sandy, at the end of it's about an hour long interview. I highly recommend you see it. It's very entertaining. But Sandy gave him an opportunity. Hey, do you want us to cut anything out, edit anything? And Elon's saying, no, leave it. You don't need to show it to me. Like, I just do it. Do what you want with it. So, again, how many CEOs do that? How many in this era of PC and not saying the wrong thing or accidentally saying something that you didn't really mean? How many people do that these days? Saying, no, I don't even need to proofread it or proof watch it. Like, it's fine. Do what you want with it. Like, that's incredible. At the time, the richest man in the world, the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, a man who has everything to lose. No, it's all good. That's unheard of.
He has very little in the way of MBAs to get in his way. You've heard him talk about it. I talk about it. Everyone who's watched companies go out of business have talked about it. The MBA philosophy is the fastest way to take a good company and send it down the primrose path. No MBA creates a wonderful new company. None. They're always entrepreneurs. They're also, if you look around at any of the great things that you're using right now, like light bulbs, your computer, this TV set, they weren't created by MBAs. MBAs can manipulate, but they cannot create. And when you want to create, you have to get as far away from anyone that's from Harvard as you possibly can, because they'll get in the way and they'll tell you things like, oh, no, we have to, no, that's good enough. Don't stop right there. And then, can we reuse this? Regardless of its weight, regardless of its shape, regardless of its functionality, it means nothing to these people. All they want to do is stay put so they can get that money.
So this is pretty timely, especially with the recent Q2 earnings. I actually have a link of it here. You can watch it, see my analysis and my model. But it's very timely because Elon, during the earnings call, the Q2 earnings call, he talks about how, how I don't want to say he has disdain for MBAs or lawyers or anyone in finance, but he does make mention that we probably have too much talent in those industries and not enough in manufacturing and engineering, right? And these places where we could use a lot of that, big brain and that power and that energy focused on other things rather than just in finance and in the legal industry. And here Sandy goes on to talk about one of the biggest reasons why Tesla is successful is because they don't have a whole bunch of MBAs running the business, right? It's not an MBA, down organization format. It's led by an engineer. It's led by Elon. And engineering is it's the ethos of the company. It's the main principle. We're not running a company based on bean counting and can we cut here, can we cut there, right? We're letting the engineering make the decisions and everything else isn't true, right? This is first principles thinking. It's very basic. The fundamental laws of physics and everything else doesn't matter. As far as the MBAs and, finance and all that, of course it's needed for every company. His point is just that doesn't mean that those are the people that need to be running the company. Okay, those aren't the people that design and create and innovate. They're not the ones that understand what a certain experience is with the user interface, or what it means to have something vertically integrated and how that comes across to the end user, right? These are principles that engineers and designers that they fundamentally understand, and those are the things that you can't get away from. Otherwise, your company will inevitably die or become another Me Too company, which we see with every other OEM now, right? They're all trying to buy their innovation rather than innovating from within. And that is a systemic problem when it comes from having an organization led by nothing but MBAs and thinking about the finance first rather than the product and engineering first.
Elon Musk does not think like that. He is an engineer's engineer. He thinks on first principles. And when I went through his facility versus what I would see if I went to one of the other companies that make rocket ships and things like that, the entire product is 100% different. Welded stainless steel construction, as opposed to this like building a rocket ship similar to what you'd build an airplane with rivets and things like that. They don't do that. Theirs is all welded together. The design of the rocket, is similar in shape to everybody else, and that's where the similarities end. After that, theirs is entirely different. Why? Because they're not afraid to change materials and to change the paradigm that currently rocket ship manufacturers have.
And this is just from a rocket perspective, right? This carries over into Tesla, and it carries over across the gamut when it comes to any Elon Musk company, right? This idea of challenging the norm and the mold and not being afraid of it. But again, this only comes from engineering-led companies, right? You don't see that from any other company that's led by anyone who isn't an engineer.
People who are asking about the innovation of going to mega castings are new companies. All new companies are very interested in that type of technique or technology. The old ones are happy to stamp and weld. They are not going to move in that direction. And the reason for that is because they have a tremendous amount of sunk costs. And what would they do with all the extra space that would be in because with that, you can chop 1/3 out of the body shop. 1/3 of the space in the body shop disappears by going to the mega casting.
It's incredible.
And that's after I take into account that I've got to have these great big giant casting machines dropped into place. But still, I can cut off 1/3 of the body shop.
So here again, we see where there's just this differentiation between Tesla and the field. Okay, the field, or the OEMs really, are the ones who have all of these factories, manufacturing plants already, in progress. They're all old. They're all extremely dated, but they already have their system, their processes in place. Okay, and they have all these sunk costs and all these robots, these machines, these stamps, etc. Meanwhile, Tesla with the Giga Press or the mega castings, they will be able to get rid of 1/3 of floor space in their factories just by going to the mega casting. Nobody else is doing this. That's a legacy company. The only companies reaching out to Sandy Munro about how to go about this, how to move forward, and how to innovate for this are new companies. Okay, this is a big deal because this shows you how far behind everyone is. And not only that they're far behind, but the OEMs and the ones who have the money and have the experience and expertise to catch Tesla, they're not innovating. They're going to be stuck in their own ways, and they're going to have this mentality, this bean counter MBA mentality of, we already have this sunk cost. Why would we redo this? And that's a problem, okay? Tesla's going to be able to get their vehicles cheaper and cheaper and be able to sell it at higher and higher margins. You throw in the fact that they already have the lead on everything. They're going to be able to build cars faster. You throw in the fact that they have full self-driving. I mean, it's, when you really start peeling the layers of the onion back, you really start to understand why Tesla, even today, is a very, very undervalued stock. Now, again, none of this is investment advice. This is just my opinion. But, allow the engineering mind speak, and you do with what you will with that information. But I would not be ignoring it if I were you.
Sandy, you are a Cybertruck a holder, like reservation holder. And I wanted to ask you, you've spoken a lot about, okay, the mega casting pieces, and you've also talked a lot about how efficient it will be to build the exoskeleton. Once the Cybertruck is ramped up, Tesla will have more cost saving out of like the 3 mega casting pieces or from the origami steeling process, stainless steel process.
So somebody asked me about that. They asked me how much of a difference there'd be. And my guess is, and it's only a guess because I don't know everything, but I'm going to assume that the exoskeleton is one piece and they're going to do what they said they're going to do. So I said that 60% of the floor space that you'd normally need would disappear. And I said that, and later on I thought, well, wait a minute, is it 60% or is it 70%? I'm not sure. So when I get some time off, if I get a vacation, I'm going to lay out the factory, and I will guess at, I won't guess. I do this kind of stuff for a living, and I will put it together and figure out whether or not it's 60 or 70%.
So that's pretty wild. Assuming that the Cybertruck is purely a one-piece exoskeleton, it could save 60 to 70% of floor space. Okay, this is an improvement on top of already what the mega casting with the front and the rear and the structural pack do, right? That, as we mentioned before, saves a ton of space, but we're talking about 60 to 70% floor space just by using this one unibody exoskeleton with the Cybertruck. This is just amazing and unparalleled.
When you went to visit Elon Musk, you told him that, look, Elon, I have flown C-17, I have driven all kinds of cars, but when I went with the Silicon Owner Club Model 3 full self-driving beta, I was blown away. How was your feeling, like when you saw for the first time how the full self-driving was behaving?
Okay, so I've been in other vehicles that had allegedly had full self-driving. They were maybe alpha or beta vehicles, and they worked fine as long as they only made right turns, and there wasn't too many things to confuse the software.
I love how he says allegedly have self-driving. I'm not going to name names here, but I think you guys all know who those companies are. They've been at it for over a decade, and they're still within their little geofenced areas, or they are just keep within the lane, and they're not real self-driving. Okay, so I think it's funny how Sandy tries to toe the line when he's characterizing these other self-driving companies
to confuse the sensors and software. So I got in the car and I had an expectation. Okay, so I didn't have an expectation on Elon Musk, but I had an expectation of what this was going to do. And the first thing it did was it drove itself out of the parking lot, and that's a big surprise. Nobody else I saw did that.
And keep in mind that as of right now, especially with FSD Beta 9.1, 9, 8.2, any of them, Tesla is not yet working on parking lots, okay? And Sandy was impressed with 8.2 that it was able to leave the parking lot. This isn't even something Tesla's working on yet, okay? Elon, I think, alluded to this in a tweet or during the conference call. I forget, but the parking lot is honestly just so trivial that they'll deal with that on the back end. That's not a complicated thing right now or anything they're really focused on. But even with what it can already do, something that that they have admitted is crap. It's not good. We haven't spent a lot of time on it. Just at the start of that, Sandy was impressed and saying that nobody else can do that as of right now. Now, I will say there are some companies at this point who I've seen can do that, but again, it's only within a certain geofenced area.
Then it got onto the street, onto a street, and the street had, I think it was either 4 or 6 lanes, and it scooted over and made a left-hand turn. That was a big surprise. Left-hand turns are really tough for self-driving vehicles. It made the turn in between 2 boulevards, like there was an island in the center, and it made the turn. So we get out, we make a left-hand turn. Now I'm impressed. Then we go down a little bit. Now we got to get on the expressway. And there was 2 lanes for turning left. This one was full. This one was empty. And it went right around all the other ones and got into the outside lane. And I'm going, whoa, I never saw that before. And then now it has to basically cut in front of everybody else. But it knows it's got the guts to do it because it's a Model S. And these other things beside us are, who knows, old Hondas or something. And the light turned like it was an arrow light. The arrow came on, and we went around everybody and onto the on-ramp and onto the expressway, and like that fast. This car drives as aggressively as Corey and I do. Both of us raced at one time. This car was phenomenal.
So, I mean, I think we started this video off talking about full self-driving and how, Sandy thinks that it's potentially going to be out by the end of this year, that he thinks Elon and Tesla are going to surprise. It's only fitting to end this video with this clip of him talking about his experience within the Tesla FSD 8.2 beta, right? We're on 9.1 now, and 9.2 set to release in a week and a half from now. But like he said, it was phenomenal. It switched lanes, it got in front of other cars on the highway, it pulled out of parking lots, it's handling left-hand turns. Mind you, right now with 9.1, I would say left-hand turns aren't the best thing at the moment, or unprotected left-hand turns aren't. You can see more of that in this video here I made of a 9.1 review. But either way, you get the idea. He has experienced all these other technologies, and just sitting in the Tesla in a version that's 2 iterations behind, he was blown away. We're gonna leave it there for today. Hopefully you found this video of value. Okay, the whole goal mainly of this video was to help everybody understand where Tesla is from a technological perspective. I know we got a little deeper within the tech and things that are going on within Tesla, but these are the things you really should understand in order to do a deep dive into any company so that you can invest very aggressively and heavily into them. Now, once you understand where these companies are from a technological perspective and what their advantages are against the field, against the competition, the newcomers, the OEMs, right? You can really invest with confidence. Okay, at this point, it's not gambling. Now, from here, if this is your first time, getting to Tesla or seeing any kind of video like this, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, this is something worth, looking into. From here, I highly recommend you go ahead and take a look at their financials. Okay, there's lots of videos out there. You could find my Q2 analysis and review of my model here, but you should really make sure that you understand their financials, which I'll give you a hint, or very good. But you need to make sure you do your own homework. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to everybody else. Okay, use your own brain, do your own research, and make sure you understand yourself. Okay, you shouldn't be a puppet for anyone. Make sure that you are thinking, making decisions on your own. Use channels like mine and others to help you leverage that into what you want to think, or maybe as another resource to bounce ideas off of. Okay, so again, hopefully this was helpful for you. I do these things to help educate people out there so that they understand what Tesla's doing, where they're going, and how they're going to change the world. Okay, if you enjoy this type of content, if you enjoyed this video, even if you didn't, it's okay. Do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that bell, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.